Flight 447. The cabin lights were dimmed for the overnight flight from Chicago to Seattle. Outside the small windows, city lights faded into darkness as Flight 447 climbed steadily. The Boeing 737 was nearly full with 147 passengers, most of them business travelers and families returning home after the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. In Seat 8A, Sophia Lee adjusted her window shade and pulled her small blanket up to her chin. She had chosen the window seat because it was quieter, and she could lean against the wall to sleep. To anyone looking at her, she seemed like just another tired traveler, a young woman in her early 30s, maybe a business consultant or a teacher heading home. The flight attendants had noticed her during boarding. She was polite but quiet, declining a pre-flight drink and simply asking for a pillow. Her movements were calm and confident, but nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything other than a regular passenger. As the plane reached its cruising altitude, the flight attendants started their quiet service. When they reached row 8, they paused to look at Sophia's peaceful form. "She's been out since we took off," whispered Jessica Chin, the senior flight attendant. "Poor thing must have had a really long day." They were careful not to disturb her as they served the other passengers in her row. The businessman in 8B, a middle-aged man in a suit, was working on his laptop. He glanced at Sophia and shook his head sympathetically. "Some people can sleep anywhere," he murmured. "I wish I had that ability." What no one on the plane knew was the truth about Sophia Lee. Hidden beneath her ordinary passenger facade was a secret that would soon prove vital. Sophia was a seasoned commercial airline pilot with over 8,000 flight hours. She held the highest level of pilot certification and was current on the Boeing 737 they were flying.
Before we dive in, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button because I'm sure you don't want to miss another amazing story.
Her career had started in the United States Air Force, where she flew transport aircraft in challenging conditions around the world. Her military experience taught her to handle emergencies with calm precision. After her military service, Sophia became a captain for a major airline, handling everything from mechanical failures to severe storms. Just last month, she had safely landed a plane after an engine failure on takeoff. This week had been particularly demanding, even for Sophia. She had just finished her annual training, which included 3 days of intensive simulator sessions. The training was mentally and physically exhausting, designed to prepare pilots for every possible emergency. The final day had been brutal, with instructors throwing every problem imaginable at her, but she had passed with flying colors. After the training, Sophia was looking forward to a few days off. She had booked this flight as a passenger because she wanted to decompress. She chose not to identify herself to the flight crew, a common decision for off-duty pilots who just want to travel without being asked for minor help. She had deliberately removed all signs of her profession. Her uniform was at her hotel, her pilot's license was in her wallet, and her crew badge was at home. She was just another anonymous passenger, which was exactly what she wanted. Up in the cockpit, Captain Daniel Clark and First Officer Emily Davis were conducting their own quiet routines. Captain Clark, a 22-year veteran, was feeling unusually tired. At 54, he had been flying for more than 2 decades, but recently, he had been experiencing occasional chest discomfort. He had mentioned it to his wife but was reluctant to see a doctor for fear of losing his flying license. First Officer Davis, at 29 years old, was focused on her duties but felt uneasy about the weather ahead. The report showed a rapidly intensifying storm system developing between Chicago and Seattle. As Flight 447 flew through the peaceful night sky, none of the 149 people aboard could have predicted how dramatically their situation was about to change. The combination of Captain Clark's deteriorating health, the approaching severe weather, and Sophia's hidden expertise would soon create a scenario that would test everyone's courage. Captain Daniel Clark suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. He gripped the controls, trying to steady himself as sweat broke out on his forehead. "Jim, you okay?" Emily asked when she saw him struggling. I think I'm having a heart attack," he gasped, his left arm going numb. "I need you to take control of the aircraft." The words sent a chill through the cockpit. Emily immediately took control, her hands steady on the controls despite the rush of adrenaline. Her training kicked in, and she began the procedures for a pilot who becomes unable to perform their duties. "Captain Clark is incapacitated," Emily announced into her headset, alerting Seattle Center Air Traffic Control. "We have a medical emergency in the cockpit and are requesting immediate clearance to the nearest airport." "Flight 447, Seattle Center copies your emergency," the controller replied. "What is the nature of the emergency?" "Pilot unable to continue due to a suspected heart event," Emily said, maintaining her composure. "First officer assuming command. Requesting vectors to Seattle and paramedic assistance upon arrival." But even as Emily handled this immediate crisis, she became aware of a second, equally serious problem. The weather radar showed a massive storm directly in their path. A solid wall of red and yellow, indicating severe turbulence and dangerous conditions. The storms had intensified much faster than predicted. Emily realized she was facing the most challenging situation of her flying career. She was now the sole pilot, responsible for 147 passengers, and she had to navigate a severe storm that would test her limited experience. In the cabin, the passengers remained unaware. Sophia continued to sleep peacefully. The businessman in 8B was dozing, and the rest of the passengers were either asleep or quietly reading. No one knew that their lives were about to depend on the quick thinking of their flight crew. Senior Flight Attendant Jessica Chen received the emergency call from the cockpit and understood the gravity of the situation. She quietly alerted her colleagues, using hand signals to avoid alarming the passengers. They began preparing for a difficult approach, securing loose items, and reviewing emergency procedures. "How bad is it up there?" Jessica asked Emily through the intercom. "Captain Clark is unconscious," Emily replied, her voice tense. "I'm flying alone into a severe storm. I could really use someone with more experience." Jessica nodded, understanding what Emily was asking. She knew that off-duty pilots sometimes traveled as passengers and could provide valuable assistance. It was a long shot, but worth trying. She knew the announcement might cause anxiety, but the benefits of finding a qualified pilot far outweighed the risk. Jessica returned to the cabin, picked up the intercom, and took a deep breath. She knew her next words would change the mood on Flight 447 forever. Ophia was in the middle of a peaceful dream when the intercom crackled to life. Even in sleep, her pilot's instincts remained alert. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your senior flight attendant speaking," Jessica's voice said. It was calm, but Sophia's trained ear detected the underlying tension. "We have encountered a medical emergency in the cockpit, and our captain is unable to continue his duties. Our first officer is safely operating the aircraft, but we are also facing challenging weather conditions." Sophia's eyes snapped open instantly. Medical emergency in the cockpit was exactly the kind of announcement that triggered her professional instincts. "If there are any qualified pilots among our passengers, commercial pilots, military aviators, flight instructors, or anyone with significant aviation experience, please press your call button immediately. We need your assistance to ensure the safety of everyone aboard." Around the cabin, passengers began to stir and look around nervously. The businessman in 8B sat up straight, his face showing concern. "Medical emergency?" he whispered anxiously. "What does that mean? Is the pilot okay?" A mother traveling with 2 young children leaned forward. "Are we in danger? Should I wake up my kids?" Sophia sat up straight, her mind instantly clear. She could feel the subtle changes in the aircraft's movement that indicated they were hitting turbulence. Her experienced senses were picking up on things most passengers would never notice. She looked around the cabin, scanning for anyone who might show signs of aviation knowledge. Her finger hovered over the call button. Part of her wanted to remain anonymous. After her exhausting week of training, she had been looking forward to a quiet trip home. But as she heard the growing concern in the passengers' voices and felt the aircraft's movement becoming more pronounced, she knew she couldn't ignore her duty. Her years of training had prepared her for exactly this situation. She pressed the call button. Jessica appeared within seconds. "Are you a pilot?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Sophia replied, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Commercial airline pilot with 8,000 hours. Military transport experience, current on the Boeing 737. Relief flooded Jessica's face. Thank God. The cockpit is this way. As Sophia stood, the businessman in 8B stared at her in shock. You're a pilot? But you've been sleeping this whole time. I was off duty, Sophia said simply, following Jessica toward the front of the plane. The turbulence was getting worse, and she had to grip the seatbacks to keep her balance. What's our situation? Sophia asked Jessica as they approached the cockpit door. Captain Clark collapsed about 10 minutes ago, Jessica said. First Officer Davis is flying, but she's never handled weather this severe on her own. We're about an hour from Seattle, but there's a major storm between us and the airport. Sophia nodded. She had flown through plenty of storms. It wasn't easy, but it was manageable with the right approach. The cockpit door opened, and she got her first look at the situation. Captain Clark was unconscious in the left seat, and Emily was gripping the controls with both hands as the plane bucked. I'm Sophia Lee, commercial pilot, she said, moving to the observer's seat. What's your experience level? Emily Davis, first officer, 2,800 hours, Emily replied without taking her eyes off the instruments. I've never flown through anything like this as the pilot in command. Sophia quickly scanned the instrument panel. Everything looked normal except for the weather radar, which showed a solid wall of red and yellow directly ahead. Okay, Emily, you're doing great, Sophia said, her voice calm and reassuring. I'm going to help you get through this. First, what's our fuel situation? About 45 minutes remaining, Emily replied. But Seattle Airport is reporting severe weather, too. They might not be able to land us. Sophia studied the weather display. The storm was massive, but she could see a possible route around the worst of it. I see a gap about 30 miles to the south, she said. If we go around it now, we might be able to avoid the worst turbulence and still make it to Seattle. Are you sure? Emily asked. I don't want to make things worse. I've been through storms like this before, Sophia assured her. Trust me. Request a heading change to 180 degrees. Emily keyed her radio. Seattle Center, Flight 447 requesting deviation to heading 180 to avoid severe weather. Flight 447 approved. Turn right to heading 180, the controller replied. We're showing extreme precipitation ahead of your current track. As Emily began the turn, Sophia coached her. Gentle inputs on the controls. Let the aircraft do the work. Don't fight the turbulence, work with it. The next 20 minutes were intense. Lightning flashed, and the plane shook violently as they skirted the edge of the storm. Sophia remained calm, providing constant guidance. Airspeed's dropping. Emily called out as they hit a downdraft. Add power, raise the nose slightly, Sophia instructed. Just a little. There you go. In the cabin, passengers gripped their seats. The flight attendants had secured the cabin and were in their seats, but Sophia could hear nervous conversations and a child crying. How's Captain Clark? Sophia asked Jessica, who had stayed in the cockpit. Still unconscious, but his breathing is stable. Paramedics will be waiting when we land. Good. Emily, how are you feeling? You're doing an excellent job. Emily managed a brief smile. Better with you here. I was starting to panic. That's normal, Sophia said.